Good morning. Welcome to Orange Coast Unitarian Universalist Church on Zoom. My name is Steve Morihiro, and I am your worship associate today. It is my great pleasure to be joined by our minister, the Reverend Sian Wiltshire, and our Director of Music Ministries, Beth Syverson, in welcoming you this morning. Reverend Judy Tomlinson, our Director of Religious Education, already held classes for the children earlier this morning, and she will offer one for our youth after the service. We would also like to recognize the many volunteers that have helped to put this service together today. You can see their names on the screen. At this time, let us respectfully recognize that our church property rests on Ahashiman and Tongva land. I would like to invite you to open the chat box, and if you haven't done so already, send out a greeting to everybody. This morning, as part of our effort to make our services more accessible, we have enabled closed captioning throughout our service. Each participant can individually control whether to display the subtitles or hide them. If you'd like to turn on or turn off the subtitles, please see the detailed instructions that we have been sending you through chat. We will also post these instructions in our weekly email, The Blast. As Unitarian Universalists, we have many different beliefs, but we are one loving community. We are bound together not by a common set of rules or beliefs, but rather a covenant. A covenant is simply a promise that whatever our beliefs, we accept one another and encourage each other in spiritual growth. We affirm that all life has inherent value and that all existence is interconnected. We strive for justice and compassion in our deeds and relationships, and we are committed to creating a welcoming community without regard to the traits that sometimes divide people. I want to extend a special welcome to visitors. If you are seeking a spiritual home, we hope that you will find it here. After the service, we will be placing everyone who remains into Zoom breakout rooms for 20 minutes of coffee and conversation. Everyone is welcome to participate, and it's a great way to get to know people in the congregation. Our worship begins with the lighting of our chalice, the symbol of the Unitarian Universalist tradition. As we light it, we say our unison affirmation. If you have a chalice or candle at home, we can light them together. Please join me now as we say, love is the spirit of this church and service is its law, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another. This we affirm together. Please join the choir in singing our opening song, Love Will Guide Us.
Inside us, will we go So I want to point out before we do our opening words that this morning our sermon topic, which is on the topic of reparations, was actually asked by Alex Bailey for me to do this. So if you remember, and during most auctions, I will auction off a sermon topic. So you get to choose the topic that I'm going to speak on. And I get to choose my own words of what I'm going to speak on, but you can choose the topic. And Alex Bailey asked me to speak on reparations, which was great because I've been meaning to tackle this topic anyways. And so I was more than happy to do this. And he's been an absolute font of information, sending me all kinds of articles and information about it. So I want to thank you, Alex, for bringing this to our attention and for this sermon topic today. And I also just want to acknowledge that this is a pretty complex and difficult, messy topic that can often even trigger people's anxiety around this. So, and it's a lot to cover in basically 20 minutes of a sermon. So I just want to put that out there to just relax, ease into this, and let Alex and I maybe give you some things to think about. So let's begin this morning with the words by someone who has had to wrestle with a past that is also filled with atrocities. The words from Nelson Mandela. He wrote this: "I have walked that long road to freedom. I've tried not to falter. I've made missteps along the way. But I have discovered the secret that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. I have taken a moment here to rest, to steal a view of the glorious vista that surrounds me, to look back on the distance I have come. But I can rest only for a moment, for with freedom come responsibilities, and I dare not linger, for my long walk is not yet ended."
Give me little time to pray. turn me out. Give me little time to pray, to pray. I've been in the storm so long. I've been in the storm so long. Children, I've been in the storm so long. Just give me a little time to
Our reading this morning comes from the petition by Belinda Sutton, a former slave. The petition describes that she had been born in Africa, kidnapped from her family, suffered the horrific Middle Passage, and then was forced into slavery. It's dated on Valentine's Day in 1783, and it's considered one of the first petitions for reparations. Now note the date, it's 1783, right? It's toward the tail end of the Revolutionary War, which would go on for a few more months. Her former enslaver, Isaac Royal, was a loyalist and had fled the country, and so she's petitioning the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, who seized his land for compensation. Now, this petition is written in the third person, as she had a petitioner who could write and speak it on her behalf. The petition reads as follows: to the Honorable Senate and House of Representatives assembled, the petition of Belinda, an African, humbly shows that 70 years have rolled away since she, on the banks of the Volta River in West Africa, received her existence. The mountains covered with spicy forests, the valley loaded with the richest fruits, would have yielded her the most complete felicity had not her mind received early impressions of the cruelty of men, whose faces were like the moon, whose bows and arrows were like thunder and the lightning of clouds. The idea of these, the most dreadful of all enemies, filled her infant slumbers with horror. But her affrighted imagination, in its most alarming extension, never represented distresses equal to what she hath since really experienced. For before she had 12 years enjoyed the fragrance of her native groves, when she in a sacred grove, with each hand in that of a tender parent, was paying her devotions to the great Orissa who had made all things. A band of white men, driving many of her countrymen in chains, ran into that hallowed shade. Could the tears, the sighs, and supplications bursting from tortured parental affection have blunted the keen edge of avarice, she might have been rescued from agony. But she was ravished from the bosom of her country, from the arms of her friends, while the advanced age of her parents, rendering them unfit for servitude, cruelly separated her from them forever. Scenes which her imagination had never conceived of, a floating world, the sporting monsters of the deep, the familiar meetings of billows and clouds strove but in vain to divert her melancholy attention from 300 Africans in chains, suffering the most excruciating torments. Once more her eyes were blessed with a continent, but alas, how unlike the land where she received her being. She learned to catch the ideas marked by the sounds of language, only to know that her doom was slavery, from which death alone was to emancipate her. 50 years her faithful hands have been compelled to ignoble servitude for the benefit of an Isaac Royale, until, as if nations must be agitated and the world convulsed for the preservation of that freedom which the Almighty Father intended for all the human race, the present war was commenced. The face of your petitioner is now marked with the furrows of time, and her frame feebly bending under the oppression of years, while she, by the law of the land, is denied the enjoyment of one morsel of that immense wealth, a part whereof hath been accumulated by her own industry, the whole augmented by her servitude. Wherefore, casting herself at the feet of your honors for the reward of virtue and the just return of honest industry, she prays that such allowance may be made her out of the estate of Colonel Royal, as will prevent her and her more infirm daughter from misery in the greatest extreme, and scatter comfort over the short and downward path of their lives. And she will ever pray. So I want to invite you this morning in a spirit of meditation to think on these words, on Belinda's life. I want to invite you to imagine yourself a descendant of Belinda Sutton. How would you feel about how she had to endure, your ancestor, what she had to endure? And what would you like to see happen now, 250 years later? Please join me just in a spirit of silence to consider this petition. And of course, when you're ready, you're welcome to join Beth in singing.
Somebody's hurting our neighbors, and it's gone on far too long, and it's gone on far too long. Oh, it's gone on far too long. Yes, somebody's hurting our neighbors, and it's gone on far too long, and I won't be silent anymore. Somebody's hurting our family, and it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. Oh, it's gone on far too long. Yes, somebody's hurting our family, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Somebody's hurting our country, and it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. Oh, it's gone on far too long. Yes, somebody's hurting our country, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore.
It's Tulsa, Oklahoma, 1921. Seems like 100 years ago. There's a 35 square block neighborhood known as Greenwood, and it's this thriving community with multiple grocery stores, movie theaters, drugstores, restaurants, and all of it is Black owned and run. 1921. During the time of Jim Crow segregation and rampant racism, Greenwood was this haven for Black people, a model of what a thriving Black community could look like, self-contained, beautiful, thriving. And on the night of May 31st, 1921, within 18 hours, it was completely, utterly destroyed by a mob of white terrorists. They killed over 300 Black people with impunity. Still more were rounded up by the police and put in camps for their protection, while no white people were ever arrested. Airplanes were used to shoot at people. Houses were invaded and looted, stores were invaded and looted. The only response by the white community after this was to deny any loans for rebuilding, rejecting what few insurance claims there were, and an unmarked mass grave only recently discovered. And how did this all come about? This all came about because a few Black men dared to want to stop the lynching of an innocent Black man. Not one white person was arrested. Not one person was ever held accountable for this. Not one. And this is just one incident in a long history of degradation of African Americans in this country, just one. In 2001, a commission was formed in Tulsa to investigate and make recommendations for making reparations to the survivors, and there are some survivors and their descendants. But how do you make up for something like that? And this is just one atrocity. How do you make up for 250 years of slavery and another 100 more of Jim Crow? How do you make up for mass incarceration, withholding wealth? How do you make up for stealing the land from indigenous peoples, for forced marches and reservations and rampant alcoholism and smallpox devastation? How do you make up for taking citizens of Japanese descent and forcing them into internment camps? How do we make up for any atrocity in this country? How do we make up for lynching, discrimination, sexism, racism, police brutality, Stonewall, the massacre in Tulsa? This list of atrocities perpetuated by white people in America seems never ending. So how in God's name, how do we reconcile ourselves with this past, let alone somehow make up for it? I mean, is it even possible? You know, our country is going through a reckoning of its past. And as I've always said, this is hard, right? It's hard. I grew up being told in my history classes in junior high and high school about how great the US was, how we were a beacon of democracy around the world, how we were a bootstrap people who, through hard work and industry, could live the American dream. And it's such a pretty picture. It's hard to place that alongside the image of America the beautiful with also America the ugly. To recognize that beneath that pretty image is an ugly truth, that we were never that great, that our prosperity came through a great part through the enslavement of an entire race of people, or the stealing of land from the natives. That's where our prosperity came from. Now, a more accurate history is being told now, and it's hard to hear this, to walk humbly and go, okay, I guess we weren't that great, but it may be hard, but truth is hard, right? But truth is a spiritual journey. And any spiritual journey that you're on is about getting to the heart of what is true. And that's always painful. But ultimately, as any spiritual journey or anybody on a journey will tell you, it leads to healing. We cannot change the past, but we do get to choose our future. And each day we get to choose. We get to face the past with courage, and we can do that right now. Our future is not yet written. So let's write a history of true beauty. Because truth is always beautiful, even when it reveals ugliness. Now, part of building a future that dismantles white supremacy culture is to first raise up that ugly past. We can't sugarcoat it. And this is in part why we're trying to tell these stories. We're trying to tell the stories like the 1921 Tulsa Massacre. And the next step is to look at how we can make amends for the wrongs that this country has done. As a matter of fact, just about every spiritual path will tell you that getting to healing involves basically 3 steps, okay? The first step is to admit that you've done some wrong. If you've done something wrong, right? I mean, it's kind of humbling. Yeah, I messed up. Okay, sorry, I messed up. That's the second part, right? You apologize. You say, I'm sorry. You say why you're sorry. And third, you then try to make amends, reparations, and ensure that it doesn't happen again. And that's really any relationship, right? And we are people, we are in relationship. And right now, as a culture, as a nation, we're just starting step 1, admitting that we've done something wrong. And boy, is that getting people's backs up, right? But we tend to think that's all we need to do, but that's not even it. No, now we need to actually go to that apology place. And the US government, I don't know if you're actually aware of this, they actually have apologized for slavery and Jim Crow. It was back in 2008, 2009, it was Resolution 194. Now, did you all know about this? Because I did not remember it, but maybe some of you do. I read this apology. It was passed, like I said, in 2008 in the House and in 2009 in the Senate, but it came with this disclaimer at the very end. It says, it literally says, disclaimer, nothing in this resolution authorizes or supports any claim against the United States or serves as a settlement of any claim against the United States. So in other words, we, the US government, apologize for the wrongs we have committed, but you can't hold us responsible. That's people's biggest fear, like, oh, we'll get sued. This is why lawyers will tell you never admit any wrongdoing, whether or not it's even your fault. Heaven forbid that we should take any responsibility for our actions. I mean, how messed up is that? We are a country that doesn't take responsibility for our own actions, the ones we know are wrong or were wrong. When you do something wrong, you suck it up and apologize and you make amends. That's what a person of character does. It's the ethical response, the spiritual response. And this is where we go wrong as a society. We're so worried about how in the world we're ever going to pay financially or otherwise for all these atrocities because we think that the question of reparations is who will pay for it. But that's not the right question. We first need to ask the spiritual question. It's an ethical question. It's a question of character about who we want to be as a nation, as a people. Only after we answer the spiritual question do we get to that practical one. You know, we as Unitarian Universalists, we can ask ourselves, does paying reparations affirm and promote the dignity and worth of African Americans? Does it paying reparations affirm and promote peace, liberty, and justice for all? Just go down the 7 principles and you're going to be like, yep, okay. So now to answer the practical question for reparations, I'd just like to note something here that first of all, there's smarter people than me that know how to do this, including an organization called NCOBRA, which is the National Coalition of Black People for Reparations in America. You can look them up online, NCOBRA. But I can't help but notice how quickly the US government came up with trillions of dollars for economic stimulus during COVID. 3 times. And why did we find the money? Because we didn't want anybody hurt by COVID. We recognized how deeply painful this was for our country. And when it included pain for white people, well, then of course we're going to find the money. We can find the money. The money isn't the issue. The issue is that we don't want to take responsibility for our past, particularly when it comes to African Americans. And that, my people, is racism right there. Because here's the thing, there's actually been reparations before. We both apologized for and made reparations for the forcing of Japanese citizens in World War II to go in internment camps. Did you know that? I believe it was in the trillions of dollars. But there's never been a formal apology for the Tulsa massacre. And this is the thing, we haven't even stopped to like look at these individual things too, because it's not just about the country, it's about us as individuals, as cities, as counties, as government, local governments as well can do this. There's never been a formal apology for the Tulsa massacre, although I will say that the current police chief did. But the Tulsa massacre is like a microcosm example as to why we need reparations. And not just for Tulsa residents, but for all African Americans. And it has to do with wealth. Because remember, here was this incredibly prosperous community of Greenwood, prosperous despite Jim Crow, prosperous despite the lack of support of any white insurance companies, government. Against all the odds, this community flourished. And had it continued to do so, it would have created generations of wealthy Black Americans, because that's how most wealth is generated. It's inherited. It begins in family-owned businesses and family-owned land. For hundreds of years, African Americans have been denied both, either having it forcibly ripped from them or denied opportunities like education and professional jobs that would have put them on that road to wealth. Now, some people, say, well, yeah, but you can't predict whether or not someone would have gone on to be prosperous. Or can you? Now, many of you probably remember from your history, I remember I have a vague memory of being taught this in high school, that when the Civil War ended, the freed African Americans were offered 40 acres, the sort of famous 40 acres and a mule. They actually just had these leftover mules from the army and they needed to get rid of them. So they were like, here, you can have a mule. So, but anyway, they were going to do these 40 acres along the southern coast of the US as reparations for slavery. This is something that Lincoln did as an executive order, basically. But as soon as Lincoln was assassinated, Andrew Jackson rescinded the executive order just absolutely immediately. It was one of the first things that he did. Now, those 40 acres, because they laid it out, they laid out the tract of where those 40 acres were for for all of the different slaves along the coast, the southern coast. Well, that currently contains oil fields, country clubs, a baseball spring training facility, not to mention seafront property. That wealth could have been in the hands of African Americans. And as we know, money is power. And they've been denied the wealth that would have given them power. So reparations is not about throwing money at people, it's about creating power and wealth equity. It's a spiritual, ethical question about righting a historical wrong. I think it's important to also point out that reparations is not about punishment. It's about repairing something that's been broken. It's about healing. Now, there are all kinds of creative ideas about how to distribute the wealth, which is very messy and complex, including scholarships or baby bonds, housing support. And none of it, by the way, has anything to do with taking wealth away from white people, okay? Just saying. And it's not just African Americans, of course, but also indigenous peoples as well. There's so much that needs to be done, but hey, that's a whole other sermon, and we're going to be talking about that in a few weeks. So what is being done? Now, nationally, we're in a bit of a gridlock. For 25 years, Congressman John Conyers Jr. marked every session of Congress by introducing Bill H.R. 40, calling for the study of reparations, just the study of reparations. And for 25 years, it never made it out of committee. Never. It's only now, after 25 years, with everything going on in our country, that it's actually being considered. So one of the first things you can do is call your congressperson and ask them to vote yes on HR 40 for the study of reparations. All it is a study, people. Okay, it's not even saying that they're going to do it, just a study. And we can learn something from how other countries have approached their own atrocities, how Germany is dealing with the Holocaust, how they're not sweeping it on the rug, how they have done reparations, how South Africa is dealing with apartheid. And again, no one's done it perfectly, but at least they're dealing with it. If we want to be a world leader in democracy, okay, we need to do this better. You know what I'm saying? All right, but we don't have to wait for our national government to get their act together. All right, cities, states, institutions, and individuals are all starting to take responsibility for our past, and we can too. So for example, cities like Evanston, Illinois are starting to make reparations for their involvement in the slave trade. Georgetown University, which is a Jesuit institution, they found in their records that they had sold 272 slaves in order to stop them from going to bankruptcy back in the 18th century. And they're making restitution to descendants of those slaves. It's not a lot of money, but at least it's something. They're trying. They're doing something. And in fact, All Souls, a Unitarian Universalist church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is, interestingly enough, one of our largest churches in Tulsa, Oklahoma, started a fund to help the descendants of Greenwood and that whole community. Now, again, they're allowing everybody to donate to this. And it isn't much, but they're very clear that it's a symbolic amount. And basically what they're trying to do is trying to be the moral voice of their city, trying to help people think about what they're doing. Quite frankly, they're trying to kind of shame their city into doing something. Now, organizations, companies, and churches like ours are making sure that we hire people, musicians. Beth is very clear that we're going to hire musicians that are from marginalized backgrounds. Churches are looking at hiring staff from marginalized backgrounds. We can offer free use of our facilities for meetings for struggling grassroots organizations like Black Lives Matter or Immigrant Justice or maybe a transgender AA group or whatever it is. We can offer that. That's one way that we can help with that wealth disparity. Now, individuals like you and me, we can help with the redistribution of wealth by being customers of Black-owned businesses. And all you need to do is do a search in Google for Black-owned businesses, Orange County, and you're going to get a nice list. Because, okay, it's time to take responsibility, to have the courage, the persistence, the strength to take responsibility, because obviously our ancestors did not have that courage. It's time to put our big boots on. And remember, reparations are not about punishment. It's not about blame. It's about truth, about restoration, about healing. This country must take responsibility for its past. It's the only way we will build a better and prosperous future for everyone. We've got a long road ahead of us, and the only way we're going to win this race is to keep moving forward with love, as always, guiding us. Let us sing.
Guide my feet
Unitarian Universalist congregations are fully self-supporting, meaning that members and friends raise all funds for the operating budget, ministries, and programs of the church. We are ever grateful for your gifts of time, treasure, and talent. OCUUC amplifies that spirit of generosity by sharing 1/2 of the plate we receive with an organization that shares our values. In February, this past month, through your generosity, we contributed $640 to Wetlands and Wildlife Care Center in Huntington Beach. Throughout the month of March, we are supporting Stand Up for Kids, Orange County. Information about this organization is on the screen. Their mission statement is ending the youth cycle of youth homelessness. We do this in cities across America, one youth at a time. Their vision is we strive to build communities where all youth know care, feel loved, and have a support system to help them move quickly from surviving to thriving. Please give generously so that this organization can help these youth to run their race. There are multiple ways in which you can support the church and Stand Up for Kids Orange County. You can mail a check, or as shown in the slide, you can go through our website, use an app called Give Plus, or by texting. The choice is yours. All the information is on our website should you need it. As always, thank you for your generosity.
There's honey in the rock for all God's children. Honey in the rock, honey in the rock. There's honey in the rock for all God's children. Feed every child of God.
Hypocrite leaders the people despise.
Feed every child of God.
They got nothing on their tongues but lies.
Feed every child of God.
Oh, we can have justice if we care.
Feed every child of God.
Right is right and fair is fair.
Feed every child of God.
There's honey in the rock for all God's children. Honey in the rock, honey in the rock. There's honey in the rock for all God's children. Feed every child of God. Heart to heart and hand to hand. Feed every child of God. Together we'll push to the promised land. Feed every child of God.
When I get happy, I shout and sing.
Feed every child of God.
And make that heavenly spirit ring.
Feed every child of God.
There's honey in the rock for all God's children. Honey in the rock, honey in the rock. There's honey in the rock for all God's children. Feed every child of God.
One of these mornings bright and fair,
Feed every child of God.
gonna take my flight in the middle of the air.
Feed every child of God.
One of these nights around 12 o'clock,
Feed every child of God.
this whole world's gonna reel and rock.
Feed every child of God.
There's honey in the rock for all God's children. Honey in the rock, honey in the rock. There's honey in the rock for all God's children. Feed every child of God.
If we're gonna be fair, we gotta open the door.
Feed every child of God.
We gotta house the homeless and feed the poor.
Feed every child of God.
The chains hold you down, you gotta bring the law.
Feed every child of God.
Then we will taste sweet honey in the rock.
Feed every child There's honey in the rock for all God's children. Honey in the rock, honey in the rock. There's honey in the rock for all God's children. Feed every child of God.
Please join Beth in singing We Gathered Together, a song that puts our intentions into words and expresses our gratitude for the many gifts we share.
We gather together, we gather as one, for peace, love, and justice for everyone. We give from our hearts to show that we care. We can change lives with what we share.
So now is a time when we honor the important events and people in our lives, and you're invited, one and all, whether you remember a friend or a visitor, to participate in our weekly ritual of joys and sorrows. So perhaps you came here today holding something in your heart, moments from the last days or weeks or hours, something that's struck you at your core. And if you'd like to honor such a profound joy or sorrow, you're invited to do so. Now you can do this by lighting a candle at home, like this here. It's a wonderful way to honor what you hold in your heart. If you would like to share your joy or sorrow with the congregation, you can write it in the chat, and then I'll share that with everyone. So let's just take a few moments in contemplation as Beth plays some music, and then I'll begin reading the joys and sorrows out loud. And please forgive me if I miss one. You can help me not to miss any by waiting to type comments, loving comments to express joy or sorrow until we're finished. I know people would love to hear from you as well, but it's hard to read it with everything scrolling really, really quickly. So let's take a few moments. I'd like to offer up a joy from Elise James. She sent me a joy and she says, share a joy for her parents and caregivers who have received their second COVID-19 vaccination. She says, I'm so relieved. I'm looking forward to when my turn comes. Amen, Elise, me too. So, and Meg Wilson is holding up Sarah Jones, our administrative assistant, has been in the hospital actually for a little over a week. If some of you didn't know, we're all holding her in our hearts and our prayers. And if you know Sarah at all, send her a loving text. What I invite you to do is, she has having a hard time responding at the moment. So don't expect a response, maybe don't ask questions, but just send her, say, thinking of you, sending you love, all those sorts of things. I know if you know Sarah at all, you know she would really appreciate that. So, and I know Mara and Andre said they're also lighting a candle of hope and healing for Sarah as well. Yeah, it's been pretty tough on the family and for all of us. I know everybody's really concerned, and I feel free to email me and I'll be happy to update you whenever I can, whenever I hear as well. So Kate Kaufman has a joy. She says she's settled back in Petaluma. Yay, welcome back, Kate. And that life is starting to return to normal, even though it's pandemic level normal, right? I totally understand. Hannah Anderson wants to let people know she's grateful that her loving family are safe and healthy. and grateful for the warm weather that has allowed her to open her windows and enjoy the breezes on this beautiful Sunday. Hannah is living in Minneapolis, if y'all don't know, so they've been having some really cold weather up there, so we're glad you can too. And Ginny sent me a message that she has a joy. She said she found out that she has a clean scan, officially cancer-free for 1 year. Ginny, awesome. Yay. Woo. That's very cool. So Mary says she's reconnected with Catherine, a friend that she went to school with. She's coming here to visit soon. Our friends, we were close friends for many years. Let's see, and Tatiana has a joy and hope that all of you who can vote have voted or will vote tomorrow, which is the last day. Yes, please vote. Thank you, lifting up our fifth principle that we promote and affirm voting, or the democratic process in our congregations and in the world at large. So it's a special election for the OC supervisor. Yes, please vote. Thank you for that reminder. And I also would like to offer up to please hold Clover, our wonderful Clover. She was admitted to the hospital last night, but she's back home. Or she was admitted, she went to ER, I should say, last night, and she's back home. They're still trying to figure out exactly what's wrong, but please hold Clover and her family all in your heart and send her some love too. You know, we all love to be loved. So send that out there if you can. So thank you, everyone. All right. I want to light this last candle here, this beautiful little chalice that I have, for all those joys and sorrows, both spoken and silent. Let us hold and love all of the joys and celebrations and all the hurts and sadness. Let our joys remind us to be thankful, our concerns remind us to hope, and our sorrows remind us to connect. Let all these moments remind us that we're not alone. I invite you to join me in a spirit of prayer. The prayer is written by W.E.B. Du Bois. He wrote this simple prayer. The prayer of our souls is a petition for persistence, not for the one good deed or the single thought, but deed upon deed and thought upon thought until day calling unto day shall make a life worth living. May each of us petition for persistence. Amen.
Let us join together as we extinguish the flame of our chalice and say, we extinguish our chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. We are a congregation made up of people who all believe differently. And yet, when we gather together virtually or otherwise, we make up one loving community. We need not think alike to love alike. If you are a guest, a visitor, or someone who hasn't yet been known to us, I invite you to become a part of this beloved community. We encourage you to write in the chat your name and where you are from so we can welcome you. If you'd like to know more about our church, including programming for children and youth, please contact us at hello@ocuuc.org and we will help you get connected. In addition, we invite you to sign up for our weekly email called The Blast at blast@ocuuc.org. We want everyone to feel a part of this beloved community, so please reach out and we will help you get connected. After the benediction, we will have a short period where everyone can wave and say hello. Those who remain will be placed in the Zoom breakout groups for 20 minutes. We invite you to check in and get to know the people in your group and welcome any visitors.
All right, so it looks like I missed one joy from Linda Clough. She said we had a wonderful backyard visits from one of our sons from Northern California yesterday and the day before. I haven't seen them for over a year. Yay, finally people can get together. She said that also the gym and she also got their second vaccination last week with no bad effects. Well, excellent. So, yes, I love hearing these stories of people being able to get together again soon. So I just want to point out a couple of things in our announcements. First of all, there is no Exploring OCUU class on Saturday. If you are this is a class that we offer occasionally. If you're interested in learning more about Unitarian Universalism or about this church or any of those questions that you might have, it's a great class to come to, but we are canceling it for this Saturday. But if you have any of those questions, just contact hello@ocuuc.org and we'll get any questions answered for you, and we can set up a time to meet with myself or Karen Kennedy. So let's see here. The other thing I want to point out, we got open mic night, put that on your calendar. It's a little bit less than a month away. That should be a lot of fun if you're interested in joining up and having an open mic night for music or poetry or joke telling or storytelling. Contact Beth and she'll be happy to get you connected into that as well. The other thing I want to point out, if you haven't seen it already in the blast, like a couple of weeks ago, we did the big vote. We're moving forward with our sanctuary, very exciting. And I just want you to know that there is going to be a blog. There is already a blog on our website. And it's, I think it's work in progress, WIP Sanctuary. So woc.org/WIP Sanctuary. Go to our website and you can find it there. And it's also a link in the blast. And every week, Craig Sperry, who's heading our construction efforts, will be posting there exactly what is going on. And Maureen McConaughey also just sent me something that they are having their Cedar on Saturday, March 27th. So you'll hear more about that in the Sundays to come as well. So, all right, let us join Beth in singing our benediction.
Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me. Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me.
All right, people, remember that there's honey in the rock for all God's children. So let's go spread that honey around. This service is over. Let our service continue.